Fight!
Welcome back to Fighting with Numbers, UFC Vegas 113 preview, episode 29 of the podcast. We're almost at 30. That's exciting. I'm excited. I hope you're excited. And we got another week, another UFC card. And yes, the model, the podcast, me, riding a little bit of a heater right now. The model went 4-1 last week, pushing us to 10-3 on the model predictions. That's just under 77%. Round of applause, everyone. But listen, I know that's not realistic to maintain. Regression always shows up eventually. Anyone who's done this at any kind of length knows that regression will come for you. And when the numbers are working, all we can do is just sit back and not fight it. Let's just enjoy it is all I'm saying. We're going to stay disciplined on the bets. You keep playing the right spots and we don't suddenly start forcing bad bets just because we're feeling good. We just stay the path. And that's especially important right now because we're entering a very weird stretch for the UFC. We got back-to-back, quote-unquote, numbered events, pay-per-view events, whatever you want to call them, PLEs if you're into the WWE. But the next 7 UFC events will have no real title fights. I'm sorry, the BMF belt is not a real title. It's just a prize that Dana White gave out one time, second time, third time. He's given out a couple times for the first time and the only time. But that's the only title on the line within the next 7 events. No belts, probably a couple Apex cards as we do this week. And that means matchups are going to matter more than the names. Now, remember, this is the Paramount era, so there's a lot of new things coming along. Some people think maybe we're holding title fights for the White House card. Maybe that's true, but if we hold them for the White House card, that means we're also not getting title fights after the White House card. So things still need to be spread out. There's too many belts out there. There's too many contenders out there for us to shelve things. So we'll see what we get over these next 7 events. Let's see who shows up, who displays their aura, their personality, and if the UFC decides like, oh, that's our new star. But we have a card right in front of us coming up this Saturday, UFC Vegas 113 from the new Meta Apex. Apologies to Mark Zuckerberg. I'm sure he paid a pretty dollar. We do get more butts in the seats there at the Apex, but it's still not a real venue, UFC. But we'll take it. At least there's more chairs around to go around. We've got 3 fights to break down on this card. Let's get it going. UFC Vegas 113. As a reminder, before we jump in, actually, I am Rob Moreno, a.k.a. Robbio, a.k.a. Bobby Knuckles, a.k.a. the creator of this model prediction and this here podcast that is labeled Fighting with Numbers. Now, let's really get it going. All right, let's start right here. Cong Wang versus Eduarda Moura. This fight's really interesting because on paper, things actually look pretty similar as far as their records go. Both women are 3-1 in the UFC. Both are on 2-fight win streaks, and both are still relatively early in their UFC runs. But once you get past the surface, the numbers start to separate these two pretty clearly. Cong Wang, the Joker, as she's named, she's been a favorite in every single one of her UFC fights, by the way. Sometimes a pretty big one. And honestly, the stats kind of explain why. She's currently sitting at an 86% XR percentage, which is elite. Moura, on the other hand, she's down at 61%, which is solid, but it's not in the same tier exactly. And stylistically, this is a classic striker versus grappler type of situation. You'll see it in the numbers here. Cong Wang is about as pure of a striker as you'll see. She spends 98% of her UFC cage time at a distance. And when she's there, she's absolutely cooking. I think the kids say that, so I'm going to try to say that. She's landing 7.58 significant strikes per minute. That's ridiculous. And even more ridiculous is the 4.74 differential. That means she's not just throwing heavy volume. She's landing clean, avoiding damage, absorbing just under 3 significant strikes per minute. That's impressive when you throw that many. Now, Eduarda Moura's output is much lower. She lands just over 3 significant strikes per minute, 3.16 specifically, and lower accuracy down at 38%, so there's much less pop. If this fight stays standing, it's hard to see her winning minutes consistently. I mean, yes, she's only absorbing 2.66 significant strikes per minute, but with such a low volume, Cong is going to throw those in there and she's going to find those pieces. So where does Moura win this fight? If she can, well, head down to the ground. She pushes a serious grappling pace. She's got over 6 takedown attempts per 5 minutes currently and holds an 85% control rate when she gets there. Remember, she's only got 4 UFC fights. She already has 13 takedowns landed. Now, the issue is Cong Wang has defended every single takedown she's faced so far in the UFC. I know it's a very small sample size. It's also only 4 fights. But until someone proves they can put Cong Wang on her back, that striking gap is going to matter. The model sees this one way and one way only. If you're looking at the screen, you can see it. We're getting an 82% win probability for Cong Wang. The problem is her price, minus 340, minus 380 today. It's just not a straight bet for me. It just can't be at that price. This is potentially a parlay piece. There are other big favorites on the card that I do like just as much with big model scores. This one could be a nice attachment to it. Or if you don't want to attach her in that parlay, maybe a prop angle if you want to get creative. If you think Moura's toughness holds, she hasn't been finished in the UFC yet. Cong by decision around minus 110. So that's what everything is inclining us to make it to. But if you think these hands get through and you think Cong can get through and the Joker can land the right strikes, Cong by KO is at plus 400. That one's a little spicy, but Cong Wang straight up, it's too expensive, but she'll find her way on our card one way or another. Next, let's move into the men's division. We got Matsumoto versus Farid Basharat. This one, there were a couple alarms that went off on it pretty early for me. Matsumoto, he is a talented fighter. I'm not taking that away. But when you look at the numbers, there's one stat you just can't ignore, and it's his XR percentage. It's down at 45%. That's a red flag for me right off the bat. Because it's not like he's 0-4 in the UFC. He's actually 3-1, so that's not bad. But at a 45% XR percentage means even when he's winning, he's losing rounds statistically. He may have gotten some favorable rounds here and there. Farid Basharat, meanwhile, he's undefeated overall in his professional MMA career, 14-0, 5-0 in the UFC, and he sits at a 76% XR percentage. That tells you he is consistently in control of his rounds. On the feet, Matsumoto actually throws more volume. He lands over 5 significant strikes per minute, but he absorbs just as many. That's always a bad thing. That's not a sustainable formula against someone as composed as Farid Basharat. Farid doesn't chase volume exactly. He picks his spots, defends well. He has a 69% head strike defense, and most importantly, he's going to bring some grappling. He holds an 85% control rate on the ground and clinch, and Matsumoto has already been taken down 17 times in 4 UFC fights. That's a huge concern. Yes, Matsumoto has actually won all of the fights that he's been taken down in. The one fight where he wasn't taken down, he lost. It was to Rob Font. It's his only UFC loss. But the model still lands pretty clean on Farid Basharat here. It gives him a 76.09 win probability. Currently at minus 275. He's actually ballooned up at minus 298, but at minus 275, I wasn't rushing to the window anyway, so the price has only gone up. But this is one of those spots where the odds are basically correct with what the model likes. If I'm playing it, I'm going to wait for props. I don't have them available in Vegas just yet, but Farid Basharat by decision around minus 140 makes a lot of sense to me. Matsumoto just doesn't, he's tough. He hasn't been knocked down, and Farid doesn't exactly explode with his punches. He doesn't have the volume to overwhelm. And while he does have a submission victory, equally, Matsumoto hasn't been stopped by submission in the UFC yet. I think he can hold it off. So Farid Basharat by decision around minus 140 is what makes sense to me. Matsumoto's toughness, but the control and pace of Basharat should win the rounds here. We've got another one there for you. This could be a very prop-heavy card. All right, main event time. Mario Bautista versus Vinicius Oliveira. All right, we're going to spend some time on this one. The fight, it's actually pretty sneaky good, and from a numbers perspective, it's one of the more interesting main events I've got here. So Mario Bautista's coming off a loss to Umar Nurmagomedov, which, fair. Prior to that, he was riding an 8-fight win streak with wins over Ricky Simón, Jose Aldo, Patchy Mix, but you know what I like to say. Context matters. This is obviously not the same Jose Aldo we all remember. Some even question if Mario Bautista won that fight. And Patchy Mix, love him, but he probably wasn't built for this. He obviously didn't work out for this UFC style, as he's already out of the UFC. And across from him is Vinicius Lockdog Oliveira, undefeated in the UFC and riding a 6-fight win streak overall. Both men have XR percentages in the 60s. Oliveira's is slightly higher, though, 67% compared to 61%. And when you dig deep, you're going to see why. On the feet, their volume is similar, but the damage differential is not. Bautista absorbs over 4 significant strikes per minute. Oliveira absorbs just under 3. That's a big deal. Uh, any fighter who stays under 3, right? When I think their offensive output is under 3 significant strikes per minute, I hope they have great ground control. When they're absorbing under 3 significant strikes per minute, that's a huge plus. Now, Oliveira also carries legitimate power. 16 of his 18 career finishes are by knockout, and Bautista has already been knocked down twice in the UFC. So there's potential for a little pop there from Vinicius. Can he get Bautista down with a strike? Then there's the wrestling. Bautista's takedown defense sits at 55% across 13 fights. Oliveira's is 79%, and he's only been taken down 6 times total. When Oliveira initiates grappling, he's efficient. 50% takedown accuracy. And when Oliveira initiates grappling, he can be efficient. 50% takedown accuracy, strong control, and the ability to disengage back to striking where he does his best work. And when you put all that together, guess what? You know where I'm leaning. The model sees a live underdog spot here. We're getting a 68% win probability for Vinicius Oliveira. Not because he's way better, but because the books are pricing him like he can only win this fight 1 out of 3 times. That's the difference. We see more chances for him. At plus 175, that was yesterday. Today he's at plus 154. At plus 175, there was a ton of value. I grabbed it early, and the line's already moved, as I just mentioned, to plus 154. That tells you other people have noticed that price as well. Now, this isn't a lock, but it is exactly the type of underdog spot the model looks for week in and week out. I feel confident about it. Obviously, the line has continued to move. The model had 0 underdogs really to shine on last week, so it's nice to have one that it is confident about and one we can strike out when it's another lower volume card for us. Now, I know this is a shorter podcast again. I know I'm only hitting 3 fights out of the whole thing, but let me welcome you to a little bit of what my process looks like nearing through the week as far as what to talk about, what fights I want to actually hit. So when I run these numbers, I need fighters with at least 3 fights of data every single week. And that has to come from both sides. And not just 3 fights, but I'm hoping, a full 15 minutes of fights for each fighter. Put that together. This card, usually these Apex events, these fight nights are going to produce less fights for me to bet, less fights for me to run through the model, actually, and less fights to predict. There's just more unknowns. There's much newer fighters. There's more debuts. There's more up-and-comers. So, for example, this fight night, UFC Vegas 113, there was only 7 fights that I was able to actually run through the model where both fighters had 3 fights worth of data and we ran it. Outside of that, I then need to choose which ones are actually worth betting. The model's going to like a lot of favorites. That's common. We like Kyoji Horiguchi in the co-main event. Now, his data is a little skewed because he spent a lot of time in the UFC and then left the UFC and has now come back. But even then, at minus 310, the model kind of sees him as a volatile favorite, like playable, but risky. So I'm not breaking it down here on the podcast. Bruna Brazil versus Caitlin Souza, another interesting fight that I think is actually pretty good on paper. But unfortunately, the model just doesn't see enough of it. Pretty low score, 66% win probability for Caitlin Souza, which is higher than what her odds imply at minus 166 currently. But the score I get from the model tells me it's a dangerous favorite and it's not worth playing. So I'm staying away. So once again, something I'm not going to totally break down in the fight. Now, Michael O versus Marc-Andre Barriault. That one's actually one I could have broken down. I probably could have made this a little bit more for you. We've got 2 guys with strong data and plenty of data. We've got finishers. We got finishing potential. We got props we probably could have looked at here. But honestly, this is probably one that I'm just strictly using for a parlay piece with Cong Wang, if I'm being honest. Michael O, he scores pretty strong in the model. He actually scores a 78% win probability. I like that. Even at his current price, well, he's actually ballooned up as well. See, a lot of these numbers move also on me as the week goes. I do all my data on a Monday, so I can do the podcast on a Tuesday. Now, on Monday, Michael O was minus 300. Easy something to parlay with Cong Wang. I believe I parlayed that into like a minus 140. Currently, he's now minus 360. He's losing some of that juice, but it's just another fight I decided not to talk about because it's such a as a straight bet, it just isn't worth it. So it's more about the information. But also, I got to leave something for you people to check out my Substack as well, fightnumbers.substack.com, where you can get a little bit more of my model predictions, a little bit more data there, win probabilities and things like that. So it's definitely worth checking out the Substack, definitely worth checking out the podcast as well. But that's the reason I leave some fights out. That's the reason some podcasts are going to be a little bit longer than the others. The numbered events are definitely going to produce much more fights for us, especially in this Paramount era. They will most likely be pairing up much more data-driven, much more name-heavy fights, name-heavy cards. Those are the ones we really get to break down, and I'll run much longer podcasts for those. These ones are going to be a little on the shorter end. Even last week, I had 2 total bets on the whole entire card. Respect to those who want to place bets on every single fight on the card, up and down. I can't look at a fight card and find that many spots. I'm more of a find 2, 3. Hey, occasionally I will have plenty of bets on a card, but a card like last week, I went with 2 bets. I hit them both. The model goes 4-1. It's all things I enjoyed finding, and it all cashed out. Either way, we made money, and we ain't going broke making a profit. So that's kind of how my system works. That's kind of how I run things. Like I said, props to those who have multiple props, 10, 12, 13, 15 bets on a UFC fight card. Props to you. No pun intended there. My hat's off to that. I just can't find those spots often, and I can't find those spots as many times as you guys do. I focus. I'm a low volume, but I'm a sharp striker. So that's all I try to do week in and week out. There's no titles on the line in the next few weeks. We're probably going to get a couple of these shorter podcasts, but we're still going to have some clean betting opportunities. And that's why I just stay disciplined and I let the numbers do the work. And as always, you can find me on every single social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and now YouTube at The Robbio. Look at the description if you're trying to figure out how to spell that. Full written breakdowns will be live on fightnumbers.substack.com later in the week as well. And you'll catch me occasionally on VSiN as well. Remember, I've got the First Strike podcast co-hosting with Dave Ross. That'll be out probably by the time you're listening to this podcast. Also available on YouTube and also in podcast format. Check it everywhere. Subscribe to this. If I have more listeners than I do subscribers to this podcast, so please just hit subscribe, help a brother out, help a brother get those numbers up. But if you're enjoying the podcast, give it a rate, give it a share. That stuff genuinely helps more than you think, and I appreciate if you have already done that, and I'll appreciate those that will do it in the future. So until next time, I'm Bobby Knuckles. Trust the process, respect those numbers, and we'll keep fighting with those numbers as well. I'm just making up sayings here. Let the numbers fight for you. All right. Thank you, everybody. I'm out. Bye, Bobby.
Fight!